All right. So, finally, the next game that we worked on was our first foray into Game Maker Studio. And Studio was not too different from Game Maker 8. I didn't use much of the features that were different, so it didn't really make a difference to me. But one thing that was nice about Studio was the ability to shift create rooms or like objects in rooms. You can like drag out and create rooms much better than in Game Maker 8, which is good because in this game I did that a lot and actually it was a huge mistake. So this game was Monster Detective. It was created for the Ludum Dare 33. You Are the Monster was the theme. And this happened in August of 2015. I was 17 years old, and it was my first time making a game in Game Maker Studio. And this was also my first time working on a team. So during this game jam, instead of just working with Devon like I had in previous jams, we opted to add in a couple new artists who were interested in working with us. And these dudes were super cool. Actually, one of them, his name is Cameron, is also an incredible musician and did the music for this game, which I still think to this day is the best part of the game. Cameron also saved the game because towards the later half of the jam we were running out of time and didn't really know what we were doing, and he helped me design every single level for the game, and basically saved my life. So once the theme got revealed and it was You Are the Monster, we came up with a lot of different ideas, but the one we ended up really liking was a sort of game where the joke is that you're a monster detective who's so bad at his job, you end up accusing and killing every single person in the house, and thinking that they're the monsters, when in fact you are the monster who's killing all these innocent people. And we wanted to make it sort of a slower game in which you explore around and you find evidence and then you bring it back. But it ended up just not working because I wasn't good enough to program the necessary mechanics for a game like that. And we ended up just reverting back to a sort of Twitch platformer where you jump between the different levels and collect the items. But we actually had a bunch of interesting dialogue written up for this game. Um, if I go to my Google Drive, I'm going to open it up real quick. So if I go to my Google Drive and take a look in here, we actually see that I wrote, or not I, it was actually least of all me. It was mostly the artists, who I should mention by name, by the way. The artists that worked on this game were Devon, Surmi. It was also Force worked on this game. Cameron, who has gone by multiple different names. I don't know what he currently goes by. And I think there was one more. Maybe not. But anyway, those are the people that worked on this game. Actually, there's credits that I should check. Okay, there we go. So this game was actually, it was Surmi, Force and Careless Shenanigans, who's Cameron, and I did the programming for it. So basically, we wrote a whole bunch of dialogue for this game in which, it sort of explains the story and how you are Detective Macmillan McCoy III, Monster Detective Macmillan McCoy. It was built to be a tongue twister, sort of, and to be just way too long of a name because we think those types of things are funny. Um, but you basically go over to investigate Mr. and Mrs. Mansion's mansion, and find some spooky things and accuse every single person. So you got the characters Mr. Mansion, Mrs. Mansion, Mr. Kettle, who's the chef, Mrs. Crumberly, who's the maid, Oliver Mansion, who's the young boy, Eleanor Mansion, who's the young daughter, and Professor Wizard, who is a wizard. And the it was, I honestly still like a lot of the dialogue in this game, and I think it's pretty funny to look back on and read. And then, of course, like I mentioned before, Cameron helped me in designing a whole bunch of the levels. So we have all these design documents defining each of the levels and what's going on. And we'll see those come into play, and I'll sort of compare them as I play the game. But we also have what I want to get to most, This map right here is actually one of the coolest things in the game, and sort of just is a map of the areas and all the different levels that we had in the game. So basically you would start in the lounge over here, and all the characters would be in the lounge, and it's sort of your hub where you talk to people and make decisions. But then you explore each of the levels and find evidence of different people's guiltiness. So you can go from the kitchen up to the library, up to the observatory, or over to the wizard tower, or through the pool, through the garden, and the shed, and all the different areas here. And it ended up being way too much work, obviously, so I dumbed it down to a simple platformer, and it still turned out okay, I would say. So let's get into it. I've talked about it for way too long. Let's get into the actual gameplay. Alright, it's a little loud. Okay, so as you can tell, I basically used the same platformer engine from the last game, except with the no double jump, and the animations are much more simplified. So this is Macmillan McCoy's office. You start off in here, and then you basically, it says press space to interact with things, and that's your only tutorial, really. So you go here, and all the characters spawn in, and you are in the lounge. So if I go back to the map here, actually I can see the map in game, I believe. How do I do that? Q. Okay, so when you look at the map, you can see that you are currently in the lounge, and these are the other areas in the game that you will go to later. But you currently can talk to the characters. So if I talk to, like, Mr. Kettle, I can see that he's he's saying that he used rosemary from the garden, but it tasted horrid, and it was tampered with. I would never cook something so awful. So I can accuse him, but it says I need more evidence to do that. Same with every other character. I can see their dialogue. Oh, listen to that sound effect. Hold on. So Cameron recorded all the little voice lines. Every character's got some different voice lines, and we all wrote these down. So Mrs. Crumberly says she saw some strange things in the shed. Eleanor says maybe the dog can help you in the doghouse, which is funny because if we look at the map, the doghouse is literally a mini mansion. That was a good joke. This game is filled... Okay, also, by the way, this music is incredible. Karen's a really, really good musician. So Mr. Mansion is saying that I should check upstairs in the library. And Mrs. Mansion is saying that her son spends time in the game room. And she says she thinks it's suspicious because she's old. Gotcha. Oliver Mansion, the young son, is just impressed that we've seen monsters. And then, of course, Mr. Wizard is just going to tell us to stay out of his tower. Alright, so first off, if you didn't notice this, I wouldn't be surprised, because it's not standing out very much, but this right here is actually a piece of evidence, this perfume. So every time you get a piece of evidence, you get to see Mr. Monster Detective Macmillan McCoy III's examination of it. So when he picks up the perfume, even though it's totally normal perfume, he says, "This perfume is practically toxic. It must be monster pheromones." And obviously, that's going to count as a piece of evidence against Mrs. Mansion. So as we go through, we're going to see, we're going to try to collect all the different pieces of evidence. I'm going to start by clearing these left two areas. So this is the doghouse. Actually, I'm pretty sure this area has a piece of the floor missing. So basically, this is a piece of evidence for Eleanor Mansion, and the reason that it's a piece of evidence is because she's obviously too old to have a bear. Anyway, I think there's a hole in the ground somewhere in this area. I'm not sure where, though. I'm not sure if I should be looking for it either, but I remember people falling through the floor in this area, so I'd be careful about that. And then over here at the gates, there's a piece of evidence on the ground. Baseball is a dying sport. No one supports this. So obviously, since the son has a baseball glove, that's evidence against him. He must be the monster. And then also, once you've unlocked an area, you are free to teleport to that area again. So one problem that we encountered was these big empty rooms because we made it a platformer for no particular reason. And yeah, it wasn't great. So if we head to the kitchen, this is one of the only areas with an actual mechanic in which these burners will try to burn you. Okay, here's the knife. He's a chef, not a butcher. Right, so because the chef has a butcher knife, that's obviously evidence that he is the monster. Oops. Wow. Alright, so this is going to be a pain, I can tell. So this area is actually super laggy because of the way that I did these things. It's not super laggy, but it's definitely not optimized. And then these are... Ooh. I just realized those knives on the ceiling are going to drop down and kill me. I forgot about those. So these are one-way platforms. Not really well noted, but yeah. And then these pencil things are spikes. Because we were like, how can we make this game difficult? Oh, let's just put spikes everywhere. I believe if we look in the fridge, we can check the fridge for a rotten apple. And a proper maid would know how to properly clean a fridge. So obviously because there's a rotten apple in there, she must be the monster. And then once you flip the switch, you've unlocked the cellar. So let's actually go down to the cellar and check that out. Now the cellar is actually much worse for having glitches and fall-throughs. But I believe most of those have been fixed, which is why I didn't fall through in the doghouse. But you are supposed to... you're supposed to platform down here, all the way down, pick up this piece of evidence, which is spices. So one glitch here is obviously the cellar music hasn't stopped playing while the dialogue music is playing. But Mr. Macmillan McCoy is saying that only a monster would support international trading of international spices. That's a good joke. And these puzzles are obviously not too difficult with the platforming. And then you head on out. So now I'm going to head over to the game room, where we should find some evidence for the sun. You only need 2 pieces of evidence for every single person. But some of them are very frustrating to get. So you'd think this Xbox would actually be evidence, but no, we just needed a game room so that we could put an Xbox in it. Alright, let's jump on over here. So I haven't actually done any comparisons so far to the levels, but let's pop open the game design document and take a look at the game room compared to what it is here. So the game room basically was going to be just this stacking of platforms and jumping over spikes, and it basically ended up being that, but a bit wider. We go over here and we get this toy. So this, he picks up the monster, the dinosaur toy, and says, it must be a relic from his ancestors. Oh, Macmillan McCoy, you are an idiot. So this is apparently the pool. Yeah, this is a pool for sure. And if we look at the pool, we can actually see that this is nearly identical to what the design document says it is. You start here, there's spikes up there, and some goo is the evidence right there. And then down here are all these bounce pads. And so that all remains intact. So let's go ahead and jump down in there. Only way to get the goo is by bouncing over these and then not failing this jump. And not hitting those spikes also. Those spikes are just a dick move. In general, spikes are usually a dick move in games. Okay, so once you get the goo, he says, seriously, is nobody cleaning this place? I think that's the other evidence against Mrs. Crumberly. So let's head on over here. We are now in the garden. So the garden was basically our excuse to put a bunch of plants in here. And here we find a stopwatch from Mr. Mansion. And it says, the real Mr. Mansion would never go outside. As you know, he only stays in his mansion. So the shed is actually definitely a level that we can see resembles the design document here. So the idea is that you fall down and stick all the way to the right, and then you find some narcotics and make your way back up using the one-way platforms. So if we drop down and hold to the right side, we will get these narcotics. It says, isn't she too young for this? So obviously that's the joke being that when you find the bear, the teddy bear, he says, isn't she too old for this? And then when you find the narcotics, you say, isn't she too young for this? So Eleanor Mansion is just not having a good time. So now we actually should warp back because it's not worth walking the entire way back. And we'll start from the kitchen, actually. Because at the end of the kitchen, there is a staircase up to the library. Actually, I believe this can be accessed from the game room as well. Yeah. So the library must have 3 entrances at that point, because one goes to this side, one goes to the middle, and one goes to the right. Because I know for a fact you can get there from the lounge. But let's see. So this is just a platforming puzzle area. Jump all the way across like this. I think there's 2 pieces of evidence in here. We can already see one of them right there. And so if we check this, it's a book. Summoning Satan for Dummies. This book is huge. What a nerd. So here we're obviously condemning Professor Wizard for reading books rather than actually studying, you know, how to summon Satan. And this high heel is evidence. It could be used as a murder weapon. How suspiciously suspicious. Alright, let's actually see what it looks like getting there from the lounge. And actually, I think we have enough evidence to murder Mrs. Mansion here, so let's do that. Alright, Mrs. Mansion. You are the monster! And then once you accuse, you get this accuse music, and she says, "You monster, how dare you accuse me?" And then you murder her. That's right, you straight up murder her. Based on the evidence, 1, she wears high heels, and 2, she has perfume. Therefore, she's the monster. Kill her. I don't know if we have evidence. Oh yeah, we have evidence for this kid, right? And then you say, "You are the monster," and he says, "Fine, but I get to play detective next turn." And then you murder him. And you don't clean this place at all, Crumberly, do you? "You are the monster." And then she says, "Okay, fine, I'm not a real maid, but I'm not the monster." And then you kill her anyway. And you, Eleanor, you're the monster. And she says, "This is illegal." And then you kill her. I believe we're still... Do we have evidence for you, sir? "Yes, you are the monster." And he says, "These are things that literally every chef has. What sort of evidence is this?" So I think the evidence that we got against him was, first of all, a butcher's knife, and second of all, spices. So that's pretty good evidence. But we're still missing 2 pieces, one from Mr. Mansion and one from Mr. Wizard. So let's head on up, and we will get them, one from the observatory, one from the Wizard Tower. Alright, so if we platform on over here, we can go to first the observatory. So the observatory... Oh, is that an invisible block that I just hit? I swear I just ran into an invisible block. Oh well. I'll explain why there's invisible blocks and holes in the floor later, because the way I did this game was really, really dumb. Alright. So platforming puzzles. This game is really easy to platform. It's pretty snappy, not too hard to control. Alright. Judging by the shaky handwriting and the smell of cigarette smoke, this must belong to Mr. Mansion. So all the way up here in the top of the observatory is Mr. Mansion's desk. And actually, that might be the only legitimate piece of evidence in the game, because I don't think there's a joke behind that one. I think it's literally just a suspicious note. Alright, and now the Wizard Tower. So the Wizard Tower combines the burners with platformer puzzles and spikes. This is basically the ultimate level in the game. We're gonna see if we can beat it. So this is the design document behind the Wizard Tower. It's basically like, there's burners and spikes everywhere, and you gotta go up to the top. And then we were just in the library. The library is also a fairly complex level. You got 4 entrances, or multiple exits, and the pieces of evidence. So thank you so much to Cameron when he was helping me make this game, because I was so lost, and he just helped me by designing all the levels for me. Alright, so now we gotta use these bounce pads to get all the way up to here, and this is the skull. He even ate the skin off their head! So that's evidence against Mr. Wizard because he keeps a skull in his Wizard Tower. And now we've officially explored every room in the game. We're going to head back to the lounge and murder off a couple of more people. So Mr. Mansion says, oh yeah, we got to accuse him. "You are the monster." He says, "What? Me? I was the one who called you here in the first place." And then you murder him. And then of course, Mr. Wizard. He says, "Stay out of my tower." You say, "You are the monster." And he says, "Stay out of my tower." And then you kill them all. So that's it. You're the monster. You murdered all these innocent people for literally nothing. And we got a thank you for playing message. Sorry about the ending. But yeah, that's Monster Detective. That's literally a full playthrough. Probably much more in depth than I needed to go, but I thought it was fun. It was a fun game to make. And I'll go a little bit really quickly into why it was such a pain. So one thing that I did while making this game was I wanted to use tiles in GameMaker. So all of the backgrounds that you see are tiles, so that I could just like, oh god, so that I could click and place one and then just have a background. But the problem with tiles in GameMaker is that they are literally just backgrounds, so you don't have any object to make them solid. So I had to physically place invisible blocks everywhere that needed to be collidable, and this led to a couple places having glitch spots where you could fall through the floor and things like that. But other than that, it wasn't too hard to build out the main game. I think if I had made this game, 6 months after, with the experience that I had, it would have had tons more content. It would have been a completely different game. But it was fun to make, and I think, oh, there's actually a notepad that I didn't even, oh my god, there's a notepad. Hold on. I forgot this was in the game because there's nothing to show you the controls. But I believe E, yes. So this actually shows you just a tab on how much evidence you have on each person. And that's it. But that's literally every feature in the game. You got the maps and everything. All the evidence pieces lying around. And the music. I mean, there's really not that much to show in terms of the code of this game. It's still relatively good code. At this point, I'd gone back to inline braces rather than the afterline braces that I had before. You can actually see that I was using comments for once, which is not something that you'll see in most of my game jam code. But yeah, it was a... Oh yeah, here's something interesting. This was my first time doing dialogue in a game, so I'm still super happy with how the dialogue boxes turned out. I think they looked really good. We wanted to make them sort of look like a file, and so they do their job. And then you have the choices: accuse or do nothing. And I don't remember how I did these, so I'm gonna find out. So obviously, when you interact with a person, when you interact with anything, it's just going to check. Oh, look at this. So that's pretty rough. But it looks like the way that I did dialogue is... I had objects for every piece of dialogue. And, whoa. And that piece of dialogue just... increments over a string letter by letter so that it can print out slowly and you can see the text drawing. And my god, that is something else. Yeah, every piece of dialogue is just there to draw out the text letter by letter. Yep, but if you interact with dialogue on your screen, it'll make it go away, and then it'll check what's going on and stuff like that. But this is all the horrible code for that. It's pretty much spaghetti at this point. But at least there's enough comments in here to sort of understand what's going on, because that's not something that'll happen for most of the game jams that I worked on. Something else that this game had that no game I'd worked on previously had is a pause button. I basically just Googled how to make pause in GameMaker, and someone came up with a method of doing it where you draw all of the objects to a layer and then deactivate them all, and just have that layer until you want to reactivate them or whatever. Something like that, and that's what I basically did for this game. But yeah, other than that, it was a decent game. I'm actually much happier having just replayed it than I was after finishing it. I was quite disappointed once this game jam finished. I thought we did a really crap job. But I'm super happy playing it again. It felt much better in retrospect.